Coming to you live from Radio Cayman Studio.
For the record.
For the record. Hear from your government officials, independents, and the opposition on issues that matter to you. The record. Engage in an open dialogue between residents and lawmakers.
For the record.
The record. Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is For the Record. And now, your host, Orit Connor.
Good morning, and welcome to For the Record. Today being Wednesday, the 19th day of July 2017. Trust that everyone had a restful, peaceful night. And I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension For the Record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. For the Record, of course, is a show produced by the staff and management of Radio Cayman, and it is geared towards keeping you abreast of issues as they arise and play out on the local, regional, and international scene. I am your host, Orit Connor. One of my co-hosts in the studio with me this morning, Dr. Steve MacPhail. You're welcome to join us in the conversation by calling us on our toll-free number provided courtesy of Flow. That toll-free number is 1-800-534-8255. You can also call us on 949-8037 and the 949-6990. Of course, if you don't like to talk on the telephone, then email us at For the Record. That is one word, For the Record, at candw.ky. Today we're going to continue our discussion in relation to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association's Observer Mission to the Cayman Islands for the 2017 general elections. We're going to go over their observations and as well as their recommendations. We will be doing that in a very, very comprehensive manner. We're going to take a full approach to it where we will look at every point, every recommendation in detail. In previous shows, we looked at the 2013 Observer Mission report, and we documented and detailed those areas of the recommendation that we accepted and acted upon, and those that we chose not to accept or act upon as well. So we will continue that journey today as far as the 2017 report is concerned. But before doing that, I want to say welcome to my two co-hosts, Dr. Steve MacPhail and Ms. Teresa Pitcairn. Folks, we had a huge election yesterday in Bermuda on the 18th of July, and we saw the One Bermuda Alliance, their premier, Michael Dunkley. They lost big time in Bermuda. The Progressive Labour Party gained, they won 24 seats as opposed to the One Bermuda Alliance winning only 12 seats. There were some marginal constituencies where in the past election, PLP candidates won by something like a margin of 8 votes, and they increased that now to something like over 200 votes. So we want to take a quick look at the Bermuda elections as well and to see if there are any parallels to the Cayman Islands or any other jurisdiction. What we saw in Bermuda, they enacted some very austere measures to try to rein in their spending and to control their budget. people felt that that was being done on the backs of the poor Bermudans, the unemployed Bermudans. There was an issue with an airport redevelopment contract with a Canadian firm. Sorry. The details of which were being kept from the people, and even through legislative means and questions in Parliament was not revealed as well. There was the whole issue of gay marriages in Bermuda. There was also the issue of a pastor, Reverend Lamb, I believe his name was, who had some Bermudan connections, but they refused his work permit and he was to leave the island. And what we saw, the difference that you see in Bermuda is that the Bermudan people, when they are challenged, they get out into the streets and they peacefully demonstrate. They let their points be known. They block the entry to the to their legislative assembly if necessary. They do a whole lot of things. So a big, huge sea change in Bermuda last night.
Yeah, good morning to you, Orid, and to Teresa, and good morning to all your listening audiences, your listening audience here and abroad. Yeah, it wasn't surprising to me because I was reading the pundits, what they were saying. They were saying that the PLP would have won at least 19 or 20 seats, and the One Bermuda Party would have won the balance of the seats. But when I looked at the polls yesterday of the report yesterday of the turnout at the polls, they saying that the PLP members were turning out 4 or 3 to 1 to the One Bermuda Party. It didn't surprise me that would have been the results. And then the pundits were saying, the reporter was saying that the One the Bermuda Party members, when he saw them coming to the polls, they looked distraught. They looked distraught, and
they weren't enthusiastic at all.
Yes. And so, you see, you can't in a democracy where people are enlightened like Bermuda, where they're politically enlightened and they have a lot of political education. You cannot do the things that you could do in Cayman and get away with it. Like you said, they go out into the streets, they demonstrate peacefully, and they forcefully let people know what their thinking is and what they will do when the time comes for them to go to the polls. They went to the polls and they cast their votes, and their votes clearly demonstrate that they rejected the austerity measures and all of the secrecy that the One Bermuda Party wanted to impose upon them. And it didn't surprise me, as I said. But is this a trend? I don't think so. I don't think it's a trend around it's probably a trend in Jamaica. It's not a trend in Jamaica because the JLP only has a majority of 1, and in Cayman you had a split election where you had the independents winning 8 seats, where you had the PPM winning 7 seats plus 1, and where you had the CDP winning 3 seats. So I think Bermuda is a very unique society, and the fact that they have a long political history, longer than ours, I believe, as far as much longer, and I think that their understanding of politics is deeper than our understanding of politics. Because don't forget now that Bermuda was one of the first colonies that had an advanced constitution. And we know the reason why it was advanced to the white people who controlled the island at the time. And this kind of election in Bermuda was never envisaged, that these people now who are in charge of the parliament in Bermuda would have been in charge.
Yeah, well, they have ruled Bermuda for 14 years so far. And remember what I said on Monday as well, that the whole concept of universal adult suffrage only came to Bermuda in 1968.
That's
Prior
right.
to that, it was only the privileged, the landed classes could vote. And in many instances, you had a person who could vote not once, but in sometimes three
Twice,
times, because
yes,
if you
yes.
own property
Yes.
in other parishes,
You could
was
vote
able
there.
to vote there as well. Miss T, we want to hear from you about this because I know you were following it, and you and I were back and forth last
I
night.
know-
You probably were corresponding with some of your Bermudan friends as well.
Yeah. Well, in fact, that was how I know what was going on with Paula Cox,
Cox,
because when we were drafting the legal practitioners bill some years ago, I was able to develop a friendship with a number of the Bermudan lawyers who I've remained in contact with since that time. So they gave me a walloping when it came to our elections, suggesting that, and I quote one of them, uninaugurated. This is my interpretation. And then last night I gave them a lot of ribbon about what was going, but was really impressed. And they say that, look, we don't joke. They say this is now, and I was trying to find one of the emails that one of them sent me, one of the texts that one of them sent me, but I'm not bringing it up. They said that they were tired of having political discourse that went nowhere. They were tired of what they call the lack of integrity of the new government not disclosing a lot of pertinent information to the Bermudan people. In fact, one of them said they're going on as if they own the place. So they said that there were a number of very important issues, and they were just not going to sit down and tolerate it. And can I segue that into a comment that I wanted to raise this morning, because it touches on the sentiments I wanted to share. I don't know if you remember when Lorna called in on Monday, and by the way, I spoke to her. I texted her this morning and asked for her permission to say what I'm about to say.
Sure.
Yeah. So I listened to her impassioned comments, and as I was sitting down here, it sent a lot of chills down my spine, to be honest, when she said she has simply lost the fight. She can't bear to live in Cayman anymore. It's too expensive. Caymanians can't get jobs, and she can't live here seeing the despair in the eyes of people who just feel unable to move. And this hopelessness has, triggered her decision to leave Cayman, and she is moving to the UK on Friday to live. And I'm saying, wow. And she's not the only one, mind you, that I've heard with that. And so I called her Monday evening, and she said, well, T, I've lost faith in our leadership and anything that they have to say. We don't have that kind of leadership that is shaped by any sense of patriotism, courage, character, integrity, discipline. No leadership with a passion or a clear vision. And as we as a people give her no reason to believe that we're going to wake up anytime soon, or if we have a desire to wake up anytime soon, she says, just look at the recent election results. There's no promise of a new kind of political culture or awakening. Lorna is not the only person in her thinking, O.C. and Steve, and I understand her. But here is what I thought when I listened, to her and hung up the phone. We have to develop and evolve the democracy. And it doesn't just rest on the higher power of our elected leaders. It requires an informed and cultivated and alert public opinion. Our MLAs are only representatives of us, the citizens. The problem, and this is where I'm turning this on its head, the problem is that our MLAs currently represent our apathy and indifference. They don't represent our intelligence, public spiritedness, or awareness. In fact, our politicians, with the exception of a few, have encouraged us to be uneducated, to be apathetic, to be indifferent, and to be a society led by patronage. So I come to this show whenever I'm invited, OC and Steve, because I am committed to cultivating our interest and education in the public affairs of our community. The development and expansion of that interest, for example, in understanding the joint responsibility of government, our political structures, our judiciary, our society as a dependent territory, and the role of our constitution. That's why I come here every morning. And thanks so very much for inviting me, inviting us to continue to share in this discussion as our community evolves.
And I'm sure that our listening audience are extremely thankful to both of you for what you bring to the table here. They have learned so much as well. Folks, we're going to go to a commercial break now. For the record, we'll return immediately after. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me this morning, my two co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McField. We're going to be discussing the 2017 Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observers Report on the Cayman Islands elections on the 24th of May 2017. But before we do that, since we're going to be breaking for the news at 8 o'clock, we want to continue the discussion on the Bermuda situation, the election results that were obtained last night. We saw a situation in a constituency called Pembroke Central, where Walter Brown, in December of 2012, they were separated by just 6 votes in the polls, so considered a marginal constituency. And Mr. Brown went to an overwhelming victory to defeat his opponent by a vote of 540 to 283. We saw another situation where I think there was somewhere between 8 and 10 votes, or it may have been, between 8 and 10, and the individual won by over 300 vote margin after that. But what is interesting in Bermuda, Bermudans will wake up this morning, or they went to sleep actually last night, knowing quite well who their premier is going to be, who is going to be leading the country. Unlike us here in the Cayman Islands in May of this year, where there was nail biting and people sitting on the edges of their seats, people having almost nervous breakdowns because they didn't know what the composition of the government would be like, who would be our leader, because of the fact that so many people who were elected were independents, and it seemed as if the majority of the voters in the Cayman Islands at that time wanted an independent-led government. But you always say careful what you wish for.
Well, it goes to show you now that it illustrates that a lot of people do not understand the Westminster system of government and how it works, the parliamentary system. They did not understand the history of the parliamentary democracy and how it developed. And this goes to, and our past elections illustrates that, because the independents, it showed you they could not even get together to form a government after they won the election. They could not even do that. And if anybody wants to know, they can start reading the history of English constitutional law. They can start reading Bagehot. They can start Phillips, and they can start reading all of those things, history of the parliamentary system in the United Kingdom. It's a part of government because you have to know who is going to run the government immediate after the election. You have to know who's going to be the prime minister or the premier. And this ad hoc way of developing a parliamentary system in Cayman has to go, and it's not, people talk about the parties, it's not the parties. The CDP or the UDP party had a good constitution, and the CDP had a good constitution. I revised that constitution for them, and they have laws and bylaws in which you have to abide by. It's not the party; it's the people in the party who do not want to be disciplined by the party constitution and the party regulation and party bylaws. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be organized, because we were not organized as a party, as parties, and we had this whole debacle, and after the 24th of May this year, where we're sitting down for days wondering, a picture come out here saying this person is the party leader, and then tomorrow is a different person, and then you hear it's a different person. And it wasn't until we went to the Legislative Assembly that we actually decide we got to know who was going to run the country. But in every other democracy that I know around the Caribbean and around the British Commonwealth, once an election is finished, you know who is going to be the party leader, who's going to run the country the next morning when you wake up.
Yeah, Ms. T, I know you were looking very closely at one particular constituency in Bermuda during the elections, and that was one where the PLP were split. You had a former Premier, Paula Cox, who was chosen by the constituency, but the party decided that they wanted to run someone else. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so it appears as though, and as O.C. rightly said, Paula was the former premier, and she was also with the PLP, the party that won. And she made representations that she wanted to run with the PLP. And folks in the PLP essentially said to her, look, Paula, this is not in the best interest of the party to put you up as a candidate to run. It's just not in the best interest of the party, and it's not in the best interest of the country if we want to get elected. She, I understood, was she was very offended by this, given her long history and so on and so forth. So she decided to run as an independent, and she lost.
She got less than 100 votes.
Yeah. I mean, she was hammered. And the party sent her a resounding message that can't fly. Certainly not anymore.
Okay. Now, here, this is where, we see, very, very quickly, I'll be coming to you, Ms. Susan. We see here that in the Royal Gazette, the Association of Bermuda Insurers and Reinsurers has said it looks forward to a dialogue with the new government on a number of issues, including financial stability, education, employment, immigration, and tax. Now, here's one of Bermuda's biggest
It's the biggest
partners,
industry.
biggest industry there. And they're saying they're looking forward to it. They know the position of the Progressive Labour Party in Bermuda, but at the same time, they're not threatening to say, oh, we're going to leave now because of this, that, or the other. We want to dialogue. Businesses in the Cayman Islands need to take note of that, because sometimes here in the Cayman Islands, they think that they can scare us by saying, we will take our business elsewhere. And they constantly threaten to do that. We'll see what they will threaten to do when we deal with the whole issue of permanent residency, and when hopefully the government will follow the wishes of the people of the Cayman Islands. Eliminate permanent residency, restrict Caymanian status to Caymanian connections or through marriage, and that is it. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back after the news. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My co-host in the studio with me this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve McField. As promised, now we are going to move on to the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Election Observer Mission to the Cayman Islands for the May 24th, 2017 elections. And we're going to go over those recommendations point by point. And we're going to start with their observation of the legal framework. And they say that the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009 sets out the fundamental rules which determine the entitlement to political participation, eligibility criteria for the exercise of both the right to vote and the right to stand for elections are linked to the attainment of the status of being Caymanian. The mission notes that the issues raised by long-term residents are of a constitutional nature. So for some reason, they were privy to the issues raised by long-term residents. And we do know that in some part of their report, they indicated that they heard that from long-term residents as well. So, what are their recommendations in relation to the legal framework that governs your eligibility to vote in an election or to run as a candidate in an election? And it says it would be important in any review of the constitutional order to consider the continued reasonableness of the pertinent provisions, particularly the duration of residence requirements, in light of the mobility of the population of the Cayman Islands and of the contribution made by the diverse expatriate community residents here. So we should reward them for their contribution by giving them the right to vote. We just had a constitutional change. We just had a new constitution, which is only just barely 8 years old. The people said what they wanted there. They indicated what they wanted the qualifications to be. And we have seen historically over the years all of our amendments to the Constitution. As a matter of fact, most of the amendments to the 1972 Constitution had to do with qualifications as electors and qualifications for elected membership in the Legislative Assembly. And in every one of those amendments, we progressively moved forward, making it more and more difficult for non-Caymanians to have the ability to either vote or to be members of a legislative assembly. We saw that trend continued, and the reason for that was people felt that their mere existence in the Cayman Islands was being threatened if we allowed the franchise. So now here they are recommending that in any review that we should consider this. They're not saying that we should review the Constitution to consider this, but if we're reviewing the Constitution, then this should be taken into account. There are certainly, to me, more important issues that need to be dealt with in our Constitution, before we even get to this. But like I said before, we already decided this 8 years ago.
Well, or as the Honorable McKeever Bush, the former Premier and now Speaker of our Legislative Assembly, would say, we must be foo-foo. we must be foo-foo. And or any country would be foo-foo to allow another people to come to overrun them and they take over their country and take over their pasture lands, if that's how they make their living, or they take their sheep if that's how they eat their food, to own all their sheep, or to own all of their water if that's how if they have to use their water for their existence. You must be foo-foo to do that. And I mean, we are already now on a brink where we are now nearly outnumbered by other people, and to give them the right to vote us out of existence. You know that. You know what. Do you see what's going on around the world now? These different ethnic groups fighting each other for lands and for water and for just for life. Mm-hmm. And as one writer said, said we would need to have this war-minded set to dream up the reckless suggestion that any Tom, Dick, and Harry who comes to Cayman to work and is not the possession of citizenship should be offered the privilege of voting to decide who should be an MLA and by process the Premier. Mm-hmm. Now, when we went to see Oriet, do you think that we could go to some country that we were working out of and say that, well, we working here too, we want to come and vote and direct your affairs?
Unheard of.
And the thing that I was sitting here thinking, why didn't all of these people who have this idea in Cayman that they should, because they're working here and they have residing here for a time, that they have the right to be, why didn't they go to see the local observers and put that to them? why they have to go to the foreign observers and put that to them is because they all are the same and they're all protecting their own interests.
Yep. Okay. Let's go to recommendation number 2 and their observations, Ms. Teresa. Can you read that for us?
Right. This deals with electoral dispute resolution. And they say there is an absence of procedures guide. That's number two?
Sorry.
Okay.
After recommendation number 1, it
the
talks
legal
about the
framework.
Elections Amendment Law 2016 was assented to just.
Right. So
Okay.
That's within. Okay. So that's still within legal framework.
Yeah,
Okay. So
still,
yeah.
yeah.
The Elections Amendment Law 2016 was assented to just 6 months in advance of polling day, while international best practice indicates that laws should not be changed within 1 year of an election. So their recommendation is that future legislative change should be undertaken further in advance of elections. Equally, prevailing laws should be consolidated well in advance of elections so that the provisions of the law are certain to all.
Okay. And your comments on that for me?
I actually didn't. The comments that I made on this was on other stuff like the right to vote and all
But
this.
we did
Yeah.
see, for instance, that people, complain and say, why are they bringing this upon us now?
Yeah.
You had 4 years within which to do it.
Yeah.
You knew exactly what was taking place after the Electoral Boundary Commission's report and everything. That was the time to move forward legislatively in this matter. We dragged our feet, on it, and fortunately, it didn't really have an effect on the elections because people still turned out in almost record numbers to vote as well. And anything you want to add to that, Dr. Markfield?
Well, no, I don't really want to add anything. I just said I think they're completely outside of their mark, and this is something internal to us, and it has nothing to do with them.
But in terms of international best practice.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, yes.
Okay, I'm going to ask you then, Dr. Macfield, to read the other observation in relation to equal suffrage.
Okay, it says constituency boundaries should be reviewed with the aim of
Okay. For some reason, this is still under the legal framework. Equal
Yeah.
suffrage has not been achieved under the current electoral district boundaries.
Okay.
But Steve was just reading the recommendation.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So read the point first. Sorry. Yeah.
I can't see that, because it's
Okay,
so
I'll
fine.
read. I'll read it.
Okay,
Yeah, because it's pretty small. Equal suffrage
Okay.
has not been achieved under the current electoral district boundaries because we don't have those equality in numbers or near equality. Can you see the recommendations? Can you read the recommendation?
Yeah, it says that constituency boundaries
Right.
should be reviewed with the aim of achieving greater equality between the numbers of electors within each electoral district. Deviation from the norm should literally not be more than 10 to 15%. Well, they didn't look at our numbers because in every electoral district beside Northside and East End and Cayman Brac, we have at least not 10 to 15%, but less than 1% deviation between them.
Yeah.
If you look at that,
But not only
But-
that,
and-
but not only that, Steve, they try and tell you where you must go and live.
exactly.
They don't understand. How do you make recommendations when you don't know nothing about what's happening on the
Yes.
ground? And you got to ask that question. It's really silly. I mean, Dr. Murphy was just talking about what the former premier would say about foo-foo.
Yeah.
And what this society does is set up groups like this that are credible to make silly suggestions like this because they're not informed questions or decisions.
Okay, let's go on to electoral
And just
dispute.
before,
Doc.
the Constitution itself say that we should take into account traditional boundaries.
Yes.
And that's what we did. We followed the Constitution, directions of the Constitution. What they want us to do to go outside the Constitution and then they come back and say we're ultra virus the
And
Constitution.
Our Constitution is the highest law of
That's
the
of the
land.
law of the land.
Yeah. But you see now, Steve, listen to who they put as experts, not us around the
Exactly,
table. You know,
exactly.
those are the experts.
Exactly.
Okay, electoral dispute resolution. Ms. Teresa?
Sure. It says there is an absence of procedures guiding the adjudication of disputes which might arise during the electoral process. The Elections Office has no legal jurisdiction to receive complaints regarding any aspect of the conduct of the electoral campaign, and they're recommending that consideration should be given to establishing complaints procedures for the resolution of disputes in the period between nomination day and polling day.
Okay. Any comments on
I
that?
agree with that. I think we should have that, and it should. In other words, the court should be the last resort for it to resolve disputes. There should be some mechanism in the elections office. There should be a group of people like yourself and two other people who you could make complaints to, and then you would decide the complaints, and then there should be an appeal to the courts.
Or possibly have a political ombudsman?
A political ombudsman there. Yeah. And the court should be the last resort, really. But our constitution, that part of the constitution is very old, and it left everything to the courts because at the time that we wrote these things, a lot of us did not understand how to resolve these things, and so we left it to the chief magistrate at the time, and that continues under our constitution.
Okay, we're going to take a commercial break now. We have one caller. We're going to ask that caller to hold on. Quick commercial break. When we return, we will take your call. Please stay tuned. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record with my co-hosts, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. We're going, no one on the phone lines? Okay, that's fine. This gives us an opportunity to really concentrate on this. We want to backtrack for a minute in relation to the whole one about dispute resolution. I want us to talk about the Tara Rivers, situation, the Chief Justice's decision, and the finality or non-finality of that, because we are unable to determine whether or not the Chief Justice's decision was correct or not, because we are unable to go any further as far as appeals are concerned. I'm told that the caller's back, so let's take the caller first, but bear in mind that question. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Morning, Mr. O'Shea. Good morning, Dr. Steve.
Morning. Good morning.
Good morning to Mrs. Pitcairn. Johan Moxham here. Have we had any luck in confirming who exactly set up the private meetings between the international observers and the long-term residents who voiced their concerns? Has anybody officially, the governor's office, deputy governor's office, or elections office, confirmed that they were responsible?
No one, to my knowledge, and we're going to try to read through that a little bit more in terms of what they said and the suggestion, whether they didn't actually indicate that they had meetings with anyone, but they are saying that they heard from them. So we have to determine by what means were they able to get this information from long-term residents.
Okay, as a former Chamber of Commerce president, I sat in on a similar meeting the last time the international observers were in town, where the gentleman from Guernsey or Malta, I believe it was
Mario Galea, Malta, yes.
That would be back in 2013. So if substance and protocol is what it is, you don't just roll up on the international observers and say, hey, sir, I need to talk to you about some questions that I have. It's a very structured invitee guest list is put together, and they do a road show of speaking to several relevant stakeholders. So having had that experience, I can say that it's one of those three offices that should be acknowledging their role in this entire charade, because when you consider the fact that our Constitution is relatively brand new or newish, and we went through the exhausting exercise of hearing from the residents, voters, and Caymanian people here when we were putting that Constitution together, for anybody to now decide that, hey, we probably need to review all of this again in order to facilitate and accommodate long-standing residents who have not been granted the opportunity to vote, or also the other concern was who's eligible to run for office. my question is, or my comment would be, there are many long-term residents that actively choose not to go through the entire process to get status, to get naturalized, because they don't want to do things like jury duty. So you can't have it both ways. You either want to be Caymanian 100% and get all of the benefits of being Caymanian, or you're satisfied with the mid-level sort of benefits and security of being a permanent residency holder. But for anybody to come back with that sort of recommendation as a part of international, and the justification is international best practice, why don't they try that in the UK? Why don't they try that in other jurisdictions? Why don't they try that in the other territories and see how it goes down? Why is it Caymanians always have to be the guinea pigs for some stupid ideas that basically take away the last remaining vestige of power and control that we have? Because Caymanians have surrendered the economic power to the transient workforce and jobs and everything else, and economic power, as I would say. But we still are faced with the constant attempts and agendas whereby the power of the Caymanian people is weakened every single time there's a visitor from abroad. Now, for me, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but that's way too much of a coincidence. And so I would be interested, and if there's one time that all 19 representatives need to stand up collectively and say in one voice, thank you, but no thank you. That is not the way that the people want us to move forward, and that is not something that we want to do as Caymanian people. That time is now, because somebody's going to say, well, in accordance with international best practice, this is the direction that we should be going. But every single Caymanian that can read, that can write, that has sense, should see this for what it is. It is another attack on Caymanian people, on the power and the control that we have over our own country, and it is an insult to our intelligence when people step outside of their remit, where that is recommendation 1 and recommendation 2. The agenda is so clear that Ray Charles can see it. So I'm just saying, and I'm calling to thank all three of you for being so definitive in what you've said and how you've said it. But there's some of us that feel the message isn't going clearly enough to the powers that be. This cannot happen. Our Constitution gives clear provisions. The elections law gives clear provisions. And short of that, there are precedents in place whereby we are able to determine who's eligible to vote, who's eligible to run for office. What more do we need outside of satisfying the agenda of a foreign workforce? Can you imagine, Mr. O.C., you roll up in anywhere and you go, hey, I want to vote now, and to be honest with you, I also want to run for office. They would laugh you off. INS would pick you up and say, Mr. Connor, come with us. Oh, this is this country not for you, sir.
Thank you, caller. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have one more caller. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, gentlemen. OC, this is Kenneth Bryan.
Morning, Kenneth.
Good morning.
I just want to say that I share the same sentiments as my good friend there, Mr. Moxham. I think it's kind of outrageous that the suggestion was ever made, but I think that you will find that all members are definitely against it. At least that's my hope. I've made it clear before on your afternoon show that I definitely would be supporting any suggestion of it. But that being said, I just want to steal a little time to remind the public that I am having my thank you appreciation party at my office parking lot this coming Saturday at 7 p.m. and everybody is welcome, regardless of from what constituency you're from. I just want to say thank you to everybody. So come out and enjoy some food and some fun and some celebration. All right?
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Mr.
Yes.
Hello, sir, Mr. Bryan.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for you.
Yes, go ahead.
You remember the Tower Reverse case?
Yes, sir, I
Yes.
do.
And you remember the controversy that carried with it, the decision.
Yes, sir.
Yes. And you know that the elections law and the Constitution and also the Court of Appeals law says that once a decision is made in the election court, which is the Grand Court, that it cannot be questioned, it cannot be appealed.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Now the Chief Justice decision is quite questionable, to say the least. A lot of people are, even the election officers cannot be guided by it. And so, as a young elector, as a young parliamentarian, as a young legislator, don't you think that you or your colleagues or some of you should come back to the people to see whether or not they agree with what I'm saying today and what has taken place over the last 3 years or the last 4 years of this decision, with a view to either amending the law, amending the elections law, or amending the Constitution. And I know the Constitution was already amended to give the judges at the Grand Court a 5 years on their tenure, and so we already have an amendment to it. So to amend the Constitution and the Court of Appeal law to say that the Grand Court decision is not the final decision and that we should go to an appeal court so that we can actually test the decision of the Grand Court to see whether it's right or wrong.
Well, in answering your question, Mr. Maxfield, I do agree in appeals because sometimes judges get it wrong. The only issue in respect to that, which I'm not sure how to address it, is that through an election, obviously the country has to get on with the work that needs to be done. And an appeal process can take a long time. And as a representative now, I would hate to know that there was an appeal going on for some 2 or 3 years over my head while I'm trying to represent people. So that would be the only hiccup. If there could be some provision in the Constitution that says that this appeal has to be done, say, within 3 months or what have you, then of course, because we always need that second eye on the matter. But what I think could have helped this matter was the Attorney General actually putting the position out on it from the get-go, and rather than being shying away from putting an interpretation on the law when he's asked, because that would have been the first test, then the Grand Court judge would have been the second test, and possibly potentially making those changes to make it a very short period of time for appeal. But yes, an appeal process is there for a reason. So I do agree with you. I just find that hiccup will be you don't want that laying over the head of the government for too long.
Well, in these situations where you have an appeal from an election point, it doesn't take long. Because I think
can be expedited.
It's expedited. You can have the problem one day, and you can have the appeal the next day. They have the appeal the next day, and it's not the Attorney General really. It is the legislators, it's the lawmakers who have the right to make the law and change the law. And so I find it very derelict on the responsibility of many of the lawmakers that they have not seized upon these things, and some of these things should be one of your top priorities to do. To change so that people in the future, before the next election, can have a.
Yeah, we wouldn't want to have it crop up again.
Okay. But bearing in mind, what Ms. Pitcairn will don't tell you what happened in Australia just recently.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Brian, for that. Thank you, Ms. Teresa.
Yeah, I was just saying that there were 2 Australian senators that had to resign within the space of a week following the revelations that they violated the law that they had because they had dual citizenship.
And they were sitting members.
They were sitting, yeah.
As a matter of fact, one was a deputy, I believe.
Yeah. And the Australia Constitution bars anyone who is under any acknowledgement of allegiance, obedience, or adherence to a foreign power, or is subject or a citizen or entitled to the rights or privileges of a subject or a citizen of a foreign power. So, you see, it's as though...
And that's one of the simplest definitions that I've seen. They don't put anything in it about by your own motion and things.
Plain vanilla.
Yes.
But it seems as though we don't even trust ourselves enough to get certain basics right. We got to wait until the whole globe feel a certain way about something, and then we kind of say, well, okay, let's do it. One of the comments that you were making during the break, Dr. Macfield, speaks about how folks view us. Do they respect us?
They don't respect us.
So
they don't respect us, and that's why they take the control of our economy and our culture and our history. They don't respect us. They have no respect for us because we don't have respect for ourselves. To gain respect, you have to have respect for yourself and your people. And the people and your intellectual people in your community, you have to have respect for them too. And your professional people, you have to have respect begets respect.
let's let you finish your train of thought before we go to the commercial
we're
break,
good.
Mr.
I'm good.
You good?
I'm good, yeah.
Okay. Ms. Susan, we're going to go to a commercial break now. Please stay tuned. For the record, we'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. We are discussing the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association Observer Mission to the Cayman Islands for the 2017 general elections. And before I go to the next recommendation, all of the Bermudan papers that I read, and people, I know some of my friends down in Rock Hole, Mr. Gray, he is going to say, yeah, he's talking about observer missions and he support it. And, I am going to point out again that personally, I say it's good to have them because otherwise we wouldn't be having this discussion now. And there are times when there are good points and there are times where there are bad points. There are times when there are points that we may agree on and some that we may disagree on. But I think that it is essential to have it. But all of the Bermudan papers, I looked everywhere. I didn't see anything about the presence of any observer mission in Bermuda. I could be wrong, but I don't recall seeing anything about them being there yesterday for that election. Interesting.
Oh, see, I keep saying on this show, we differential, Mr. Burl from Bordentown. We simply differential. But I agree, we're about discussion and conversation.
Yeah. Two callers. Let's go to the phone lines. First caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, Mr. Connor.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning to your panel. Mr. Markfield, you said a mouthful just now, and it's no lie. Respect goes a long way, and we tend to be lost out here in the Cayman Island. But what I called for too, were you all talking about beach access a couple of weeks ago on your program?
No, we haven't discussed beach access.
Well, someone was, I don't remember who was talking about it, but I just want to say the old Treasure Island, well, it's on the new management now and everything.
Margaritaville.
I had some visitors there just for like 3 days. And they say, well, they was actually hotel hopping. They went from the rich to the famous, and from the famous to the I don't even want to call it lower level, lower class. I don't even want to call it. But anyhow, they said it was walking behind the Margaritaville, and as they continued to walk, they was barricaded from a wall or a fence that they could not continue to walk on to the 7-mile stretch, going west. And I just wonder, can that happen? Is that for real? And why is it that they have a fencing at a point block off from Treasure Island to whatever next to them that you can't continue to walk down the path on the 7-mile that's part of the 7-mile stretch, So just wondering if somebody could shine some light on that. Why is it that when you go on the beach at Old Treasure Island, you cannot continue to walk? You got to come look on the main road now, I guess, and then go into, I guess, a beach access and then continue to walk down the 7-mile stretch. Say, for example, right, I'm at the Ritz-Carlton and I want to walk to Royal Palm.
I think we understand. We understand what.
Yeah, except for that beach, except for that cabana in the water when you get further down.
Okay.
So see if you can sign some letter up for me.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask you all to, my two co-hosts here, we're going to put an asterisk by that, and we're going to discuss that at another time. We basically want to stay on message here now in relation to the report. So hopefully our next caller is going to go along those lines as well. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi, morning to your panel there. I just want to voice a little opinion, get some information.
Sure.
Mr. Mark Felix.
Good morning.
They were quoting the Honorable, now the Speaker of the House.
Yes.
Saying, whatever. But he is one person that also made it clear that if someone have Caymanian status, they are Caymanian, and people should not refer to them anymore by their birthplace, like, oh, that's a Jamaican, but he have Cayman status. Now, going to the voting, I strongly support the way it is now. No one should be voting unless they are Caymanian, regardless of whether they're born here or whether they got it by whatever means. No one should be voting. But going towards the candidate part of it, if someone is here from 1966, 1950, whatever, maybe that might make them a little bit too old, but you get my point. And because they wasn't born here, is it still the same thing that as long as you're not born here, you cannot run as a candidate?
That's the design of our legislation, yes.
That is the design of legislation.
And intent.
Well, don't you think if somebody's living here for 45 years, 50 years, they have enough interest and enough knowledge of the island that if they were running as a candidate, they would be loyal to this place?
But don't you think someone's birthright is important also?
Yes. But if Caymanian status make you a Caymanian, what difference? And I can use my own self. What difference am I?
Well, there are some people who would make a distinction. Yes, you spoke about the Speaker of our Legislative Assembly, former Premier, former Leader of the Opposition, and we all recognize the fact that the Caymanian, the immigration law gives us a definition of Caymanian, and we cannot depart from that in terms of who's a Caymanian and who isn't. But there is nothing wrong with the law and our Constitution saying that you have to be born in the Cayman Islands or of parents, one of who was born in the Cayman Islands, in order for you to exercise certain privileges. And I believe that the right to run in an election and represent your people is more of a privilege rather than than anything else. That is more of a privilege. So I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying that unless you're born here, that there are certain things that you won't be able to do. And what I will do at some point in time, not this show, but another one, I was reading in The Guardian yesterday about the Swiss naturalization process. 30-year-old woman born in Switzerland of Turkish parents, never lived any place else besides Switzerland, failed the naturalization test in Switzerland because it is administered by local persons there, and they make a decision. And by a vote of 20-12, they voted that she should not become a Swiss citizen because she failed the naturalization test. So again, there you see a fine line between person born there, but still not a citizen. So it's not only the Cayman Islands that restrict those things too.
Senate, I was just going to...
Go ahead, caller.
You just said if something about born of Cayman parents. Is it strictly you have to be born here to be a candidate, or there's some...
You have to be born, or you have to be, if you were born
outside the
Cayman Islands, you have to have a parent or a grandparent who was born in the Cayman Islands.
And grandparents.
Yeah.
Well, it's not that strict then in that case.
Yeah.
Because all I'm saying is there are a lot of people who are here and so you might know this joke, what Frenchie said, them there for ton. They're not going anywhere. Yeah. And if they're just because they wasn't born here, but their parents was their parents was from here, but they're born somewhere else. And you're saying no, if I was born somewhere else, but my parents was from here, and I'm here long enough, I would have the right to run as a candidate.
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Either one of your parents and grandparents. It has to be two generations.
Two generations.
Yes. It has to be either your parents and one of your grandparents, paternal or maternal grandparents.
Okay, I should have checked that out, and I could have run 20 years ago. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you very much, too. What we'll do is we'll find that provision in the Constitution, and I know it's kind of confusing, but we'll read it out. We have to go to headline news now. When we return, the conversation will continue, so please stay tuned to Radio Cayman 89.9. Good morning. Welcome back to For the Record. In the studio with me, my two co-hosts this morning, Ms. Teresa Pitcairn, Dr. Steve McPhail. Our Borden Towners are talking. They say, good morning, Mr. Connor. Please read the contents to your host, Mr. McPhail and Ms. Pitcairn. From Borden Town, my Caymanian peeps, we are listening and very proud that we have your voices and that you are both from Bordentown sharing your true thoughts on what we are going through. Thank you and keep it up.
Wow.
We listening.
Listening. And of course, my saying Berlin, every now and again, you drop certain.
Yeah.
That's what people don't understand about us, OC. We're a small, close-knit society. And maybe, Steve, you can expand on some of the things you were sharing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Dr.
I was
Steve.
saying that when you look at the whole problem that people have about the right to vote in a country. Sure, I can see in New Zealand or in Australia or in the United Kingdom where you have millions of them, 60 million people, and you're taking 4 million people and you allow to give them the right to vote. That is okay. But not in Cayman when you have 36,000 people, 30,000 people who are Caymanians, and you have already 25,000 people in work permits, and you have another 10,000 people on permanent residence and status. You would be a fool to give them the right to vote you out of existence and to control the way you live in the country, and when they're not of your own people. And bearing in mind, that ethnic people stick with themselves. I mean, you only have to look at some of the institutions in Cayman to see what has happened. When one of the ethnic group people come, and they're not going to look for a Caymanian to put in a place as an assistant if they need an assistant. They're going back to their own country and get another one of their own and put in. And when he needs a person to put in a place, he's going back to his country and get another one and another one and another one. And that's why you have whole departments now are controlled by different people from different ethnic groups, people that are not Caymanian people. We will be fool to allow that to happen to us.
Yep.
Only even the Indians in America now are resisting the fact that they are the First Nation people and they don't have their rights in their country, and they were there first.
Okay, we have 3 callers, and we're going to ask the callers to be as brief as possible to give the other callers who are lined up behind you an opportunity. Plus, we have to be off the air exactly at 9:30 this morning. Otherwise, there's a firing squad waiting outside for us. Caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC, and good morning to Dr. Steve and Mr. Karen.
Good morning.
morning.
Sir.
As I listen, I think about when they talk about this voting rights and all this. Like, people come here and they expect to tell us what they want and then give you a good example. I don't know why that guy hasn't been shipped off the island. That guy that tried to expose these nude models and stuff, not models, but carving and stuff he had done to come back. I think they arrested him yesterday. We have people that come here that have this thought in their head, this idea in their head. They're free to do anything they want, and if they protest and make enough noise, that people will give it to them. Now, one of the things I really admire about the lady who's in charge of the Australian Prime Minister is that thing that she spoke about the other day. I don't know if I'm sure you guys read it.
You're talking about the Australian Prime Minister?
Yeah.
It's a male there now, not a female.
No, but who was the lady? The lady that must have been New Zealand, because she talked about these expatriates that came in and said, "This is Australia. You have to abide by the rules."
They did have a female prime minister a few years ago. I forget her name now, but
it might have been somebody with some authority.
Yes.
Anyway, she said that
it out.
when you come to this country, you have to abide by the rules. If you don't like it, you can go back, because I think it was something to do with the refugees. And everybody wanted to come there, and they weren't expected this, that, the other thing. What we have, Cayman is a small place, and what we have to do in Cayman is to say, Caymanians first. If we can abide by that rule, when we have employment or unemployment, stuff like that, like they did in the Bahamas, we say Caymanians first. If there's qualified people in this island, Caymanians must come first. If we do that, we be in good shape. But we have a tendency to listen to these people come here and talk about putting bars across the beach and all that kind of thing. And they got $2 and they come here and they tell us that they're going to do this for us and do that. And we believe all that BS. So what I'm saying is all we need to do is to stick to that thing that says Caymanians first. If we do that, we can be good here.
Thank you very much, caller, for that. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning to you, Mr. O.C., Mr. Mr.
My
Good morning,
friend.
sir.
Good to hear
Good morning, Mr. Taxman.
the three brilliant minds there together. And I agree with everything that you're saying there about leaving it as it is, and we should be able to determine our own restrictions and our own conventions, so to speak, if that's the right nomenclature. But I know that I remember in the case of Jamaica, well, that would be a special case where my sisters who weren't born in Cayman were able to vote, and my mother and father also, because they all had British passports then, and then Jamaicans had, even before the elections, before the decision to go independent.
At one time, the terminology that was used, as long as you were a Commonwealth citizen.
Or British subject.
Right. And you resided in the country,
Yes.
you could vote. Even our Constitution at one point
That had
in
that.
time allowed for that in our elections law, just being a Commonwealth citizen and resident here for 4 years.
And, the British government then, of course, was in charge, overall charge of here also. And it was considered by the government there that it was a dependence. I remember the things they had written. I was young, but I remember my sister remarking, remember the 1965 election, Mama, look at this, we can vote here, we can't vote in Cayman, because they're running, of course. But I wanted something else. I noticed where it says Venezuelans here were able to vote in that referendum, and it didn't say how long they were out of the country or anything like that, but it said they vote. And I know many countries throughout the world, wherever their citizens are living, when they have elections in that particular country, they can vote. They can go back and vote and then go right back as long as they maintain an address. I think that's how most countries are.
Bear in mind, caller, that the Venezuelan referendum, that was almost more of a mock referendum because it was not an official referendum. It was one that was organized by the opposition. So that was more symbolic than anything else.
But I just wondered, why is it that Caymanians, with our limited amount of voters, to make decisions for ourselves, when you're living away, you might have to be living away almost permanently, so to speak, but still maintaining your contact, still coming back home every now and then, have an address here. I wonder why you can't vote. You have to be.
That is one of the recommendations that is made here, and one that
We support.
Our panel here support.
Okay, I will hang up then and listen on.
Thank
Very
you.
interesting.
Thank you very much, caller. Next caller, good morning. Welcome to For the Record.
Good morning, OC.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning to your panel. I
Good
know
morning.
you don't want me to name each of them out because you want to throw me off the radio.
No, it gives you more time to talk.
Oh, yeah, all right. In reference to that report, anybody ever tried to find out where those people were from? Where are they from? What country?
Various countries. We had someone from Jersey. I think we had someone from Antigua.
Someone from Ireland.
Various Commonwealth countries.
Okay, fair enough. And who put that group together?
The Commonwealth Parliamentary Association.
And where is that?
They have a. I think their headquarters in London. They have a unit that is specifically geared towards arranging these missions and everything else.
Right,
and there's nothing wrong with those missions, So, like I said before, sometimes we may disagree with some of the proposals that they put forward to, but at least it gives us room for conversation and for us to voice our opinion as to what we feel that we should or shouldn't have.
Yeah, but you give me an opportunity to voice mine, please.
Okay, yeah.
Okay? On the issue of we shouldn't let certain people vote in this country because they're not born Caymanians. Now, I am not going to even go there with that.
Well, first again, let me correct you. You don't have to be a born Caymanian to be able to vote.
Sorry, to run for office.
Right.
Okay? Now, where was the protection? Now, the government wants protection. They want us, the people, to protect them. But when they let in all of the foreigners here and gave them a piece of paper to say, go forth and get your license and do your business and run the Caymanian business out of their seat. Now they want us to say, no, you can't come in here and run our country. I don't believe that. Tit for tat and butter for fish. Take what you get. I wish that whoever it is behind this could drop it and make it all happen, because we were punished. We are still being punished because of what they done. Why couldn't they say, okay, certain businesses have to go through a process? No. They just gave you a piece of paper and say, now you are a Caymanian. You are equal or more over these born natives here. So go forth and take what they have. Now you as a government don't want that to happen to you. We must help you protect your job. No. You have a good day, sir.
Thank you very much, caller. Thank you very much for that. Let's go on to our... should we take the break now, Ms. Susan? And then we'll take the break. That'll give us a little bit more time to talk right through before we face the firing squad. Please stay tuned for the record. We'll be back shortly. Good morning and welcome back to For the Record. I'm going to read section 61 of our Constitution for the benefit of our listening and viewing audience, but mainly the person who called about that. It was such a pertinent question, and if that person is still listening, I would refer you to section 61 of the Cayman Islands Constitution Order 2009, and it relates to qualifications for elected membership of the Legislative Assembly. That means to be elected to serve in the legislature. And it says, subject to section 62, a person shall be qualified to be elected as a member of the Legislative Assembly if and shall not be qualified to be so elected unless. So he or she has to be Caymanian. They must attain the age of 21, and he or she must, at the date of their nomination for election, be domiciled and resident in the Cayman Islands. And then it puts a definition. It says the person also has to be a qualified citizen. And later on, I'll tell you what a qualified citizen means. And either he or she was born in the Cayman Islands or was born outside of the islands in circumstances mentioned in section 2B, and I'll read that as well, and has resided in the Cayman Islands for a period of not less than 7 years immediately preceding the date of his or her nomination for election, and subject to subsection 3, the number of days in which he or she were absent from the islands in the period does not exceed 400. Or if the person was born outside the Cayman Islands, has to be residing in the Cayman Islands for a period or periods amounting to not less than 15 years. So inside period of residence 7, outside 15 years out of the 20 years immediately preceding the date of his or her nomination for election, and subject to subsection 3 in the event in the 7 years immediately preceding the date of his or her nomination for election, the number of days can't exceed again 400. So a qualified citizen, it says here, for the purposes of subsection 1, a qualified citizen is a British Overseas Territory citizen by virtue of a connection with the Cayman Islands, who at the date of his or her nomination for election possesses no other citizenship and is pursuing no claim to any other citizenship for which he or she may be eligible. And I'm going to interrupt there for a second. If we had just left that portion in there and not got on to the other section there that was used in the case, I forget what section that was, Dr. Steve, this would have been a perfect definition in terms of the citizenship requirement. It says that Yes, instead of going to section 6, if you had left it just there.
And read the other part B. Read part B because...
And B, yes. So a qualified citizen is a person with a connection to the Cayman Islands who at the date of his or her nomination for election possesses no other citizenship and is pursuing no claim to any other citizenship for which he or she may be eligible, or was born outside the Cayman Islands, has or had at least one parent or grandparent who was born in the Cayman Islands and is a Caymanian, or if deceased would, if alive, have been a Caymanian at the date of nomination for election, and who, at the date of his or her nomination for election, possesses no other citizenship save for any right he or she may have to some other citizenship by virtue of his or her birth outside the Cayman Islands. So definite distinction between being born in the Cayman Islands
yes,
and being born outside the Cayman Islands. But in any event, you had to be a qualified citizen.
That's right.
And the definition of qualified citizen again goes to the fact that if you were born outside the Cayman Islands, you got to have the parent or grandparent who was Caymanian, or if they're deceased, would have been Caymanian.
And that's why I told the caller you have to have 2 generations.
Yes. Okay. Switching gears again very quickly. We have about 10 minutes left. The right to vote. Recommendation made by the Observer Mission. It says here, it is important that the Cayman Islands authorities endeavor to achieve higher levels of voter registration. So it say that we need to attain higher levels of voter registration. And their recommendation is that the underlying process of voter registration could be changed, replacing the active system. And active system means the one that we have now, where as you become eligible,
yes,
you go ahead and you can register, which requires positive steps to be taken by citizens to be included in the register of electors, with a passive system linked perhaps to a broader review of the process of civic registration. So what they're saying is that the active process that we have in place, where you, by your own motion, by your own actions, need to seek to be registered as an elector, and we should have a more passive system. We have talked about this before. We have, when talking about trying to encourage younger people to vote, we say, what is the first thing that you normally want when you reach age 17 or 18, whatever it is?
A driver's license,
so
yes,
that it should be there. Bear in mind that in the past, up until the amendments to the law, I think it was in 2000, the elections law in relation, we did door-to-door, house-to-house enumeration of electors. It was the responsibility of the supervisor of elections to send people out to register you. We found that to be too onerous, and we then placed the responsibility on the elector to do that. That has worked because people who are politicians, potential candidates, have encouraged people. But I again agree with them that we should have some system in place whereby there is automatic registration. And there are those who may go even further. I recall, Mr. Gilbert McLean, when he was a member of the Legislative Assembly, and even since then, talking about the fact that we should have compulsory registration.
Yes,
now, there are countries that have compulsory registration.
And compulsory voting.
And compulsory voting.
Yes.
And some that have compulsory registration, but not necessarily compulsory voting. So I'd like to hear both of you, your opinions in relation to that recommendation.
Sorry, OC, I was searching for a thought that you triggered. My apologies. With respect to citizenship and the fact that it's the most important gift that you can actually give to a community. And while we welcome diversity and we know the benefits that accrue from having a diverse community, we have to put all of that into context and think about how we are going to review this whole thing comprehensively. So that's where my thoughts were varying as you were discussing that. So perhaps Steve can have a conversation with you about it. I want to find what I was looking for to connect to that thought, though.
Yes. OC, I believe that a positive registration system should continue, and I think that people should automatically get registered at the same time that they get their driver's license. They should automatically get registered then. At the same time that they receive their driver's license, there should be one should be simultaneous with the other. Once they get their driver's license, you should be registered. You should be. They should take that information to get you registered as a voter on the voters list. I think that would be a faster and a better and a more sure method than going from house to house and for asking people and to go by the supermarkets to ask people to come to register. I think people ought to be registered automatically when they get 17 years old, especially when they go to get their driver's license. That information should be transferred also to the elections office, and you should have automatic registration from them.
Okay, we have about 5 minutes left, so just want us to take note of where we're stopping today. We're stopping at recommendation
number 5.
Actually number 7,
Yes.
the right to vote. So number 7 would be the publication of personal data of voters in the process of revision and dissemination of the voter register. Yeah. And they feel that what we published on our register of electors may be encroaching upon an individual right to privacy. Now let's talk very quickly about that. What do we have on there? We have name,
address and profession.
Address and profession.
That's the things
I don't think that is an encroachment of and a personal individual rights to privacy in relation to that. And of course, their recommendation, since we're at that then, is that data protection law should be introduced. Well, they didn't again do their research because we have it.
We have data protection law. Yes,
should be introduced, which requires that personal data gathered for electoral purposes be treated in a manner which respects the right to privacy. Furthermore, removing the requirement for voters to state their occupation when presenting themselves to vote could avoid demeaning situations in the case of some voters. And like I said before, in relation to this, if whatever my occupation is, if that is what I enjoy doing and that is what I have trained for, I'm going to be more than happy to tell you that's what I do, because that's me.
Exactly, that's me.
Well, I want to give both of you an opportunity for some closing remarks.
Well, I did a little writing last night.
Oh, okay.
So
our listeners love to hear that. Those.
And don't forget, Steve, the other bit.
Okay.
So the ballots have been counted. The ballot boxes are now all sealed. There are no election challenges, and elected politicians are safe. Their salaries are being paid, and their pensions secured. What the people now must face after the political musical chairs charade is the reality that nothing has changed. Nothing will change for them. Now that the people have emerged from their political campaign cocoon hungry, again for better days and peaceful nights, they are met with a state of affairs that are falling into further decline. Our long history has not seen days like these since these sides of 1835. Our human experience are now profoundly devastating. We are indeed in uncharted waters. Our ship is without sails, and there is no crew experienced enough, dedicated enough, sacrificial enough to move our floundering ship to safe harbor to form Burton. We as a people have allowed ourselves to be expertly manipulated into a gigantic mess of bullcrap. Many of our people are lamenting for some semblance of social justice. We leave our lot to verbally powerful groups to decide our future, but they cannot deliver much of anything. Meanwhile, they talk to pacify. Our country is being carved up to the benefit of the powerful few. The next inevitable step they suggest is to give them the vote to encircle their economic wagons. The legislative assembly is the ultimate prize. And for us, we will have reached a disgraceful historical, cultural, and political bottom. At least the people who gave us democracy in 1831 were not afraid to draw the line, pay the price, and bear the burden. There's a political economic tsunami fast approaching. Some of us are planning to run off to the highlands in England. Some have already left. To those who have already left, I say good luck in a country that is not yours. To those planning to leave, I would remind them that we will not and cannot win by cutting and leaving. We are straining, yes, under burdens that we do not deserve, but we have invested stakes here. We still have the power in our hands to save our ship, to save ourselves from those who would trade our history, our culture, and our souls for their own concessions. If we stick together as a people, believing on the God who founded it for us, we may be betrayed, but we will not be denied our rightful seats at the economic table and the boardrooms of justice and fairness. So let us continue to be committed to the betterment of all of us, and let us not forget that we are all in this boat together. Today, I leave you with this quote from the late Nelson Mandela to strengthen you. And this is what he said: I have walked the long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb. I have taken a moment here to rest, to steal a view of the glorious vista that surrounds me, to look back on the distance I have come. But I can only rest for a moment, for with freedom comes responsibilities, and I dare not linger, for my long walk is not ended.
He said,
Thank you very much, Doc.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the things I had here was that freedom does have a price. It is not free. Freedom means responsibility, a responsibility to properly look after your families and yourselves. And citizenship demands more than simply paying taxes and going out to get the vote. So it's funny, that's what you had. We hadn't talked about this.
Yeah, exactly.
And this was in
Exactly.
a part of the stuff that I had here. Yeah. See,
Okay.
we're in sync.
And I want to remind our listeners also that I read one of the messages that we received from one of our listeners few days ago. And I'm going to read it again. It's and we're going. If I don't get time to comment on it now, we will comment later on. So I was very pleased to hear that the Premier plans to focus on social issues. Nothing is more important, and I'll comment on that later. Friday's Compass, that's last week's Friday's Compass, informs us that one of the government's primary tasks will be to sort out immigration and reform the public sector, hiring mechanisms. This begs the question why the public sector's efficient and internationally recognized hiring mechanism was dismantled. I raised this during the constitutional modernization process. Traditionally, civil service commissions evolve with the Constitution, and at independence, they take on more responsibility for the civil service. Surprisingly, the UK approved our Constitution without protecting the existing Public Service Commission, although they found it necessary to create a Judicial and Legal Services Commission. So we have a Judicial and Legal Services Commission, and we trust that that Judicial and Legal Services Commission will adhere to the letter of their remit. We certainly do not want to go back to the days in the Cayman Islands where it is not what you know, but who you know and where you are at the time of who you know.
Yes.
And if you're with whom you know, and if you're working with whom you know,
Yes.
and that whom you know promises you, don't worry, you're next in line for that job that is going to become vacant. That can't work anymore. It is not supposed to work anymore. It can't happen. It must not happen. So commissions like the Judicial and Legal Services Commission need to do their job, and all of the other commissions. But the writer's point is quite clear that we did away with the Public Service Commission, and we have replaced it with us, but not necessarily to the best interest of the civil service. You will hear more about this later on Friday, but we don't want to make it who you know, where I work with you, I work under you, so don't worry, I can take care of you, even if you're not Caymanian.
Oh dear.
Folks, I want to remind you that you've been listening to For the Record. I'm your host, Dorrit Connor. My guests, my two co-hosts with me this morning, Mr. Risa Pitcairn and Dr. Steve Macfield. I want to thank you, our listening and viewing audience, for allowing Radio Cayman and by extension for the record into your homes, into your vehicles as you traverse the busy roads of the Cayman Islands, into your places of work, whether it be an office cubicle or if you're working in the outdoors. I also want to remind you that we are our brothers and our sisters keepers. There is someone out there who's less fortunate than we are, and I ask you to extend a helping hand to them. If you can't do that, then I suggest you donate to a worthy charity, because we always want to consider those who need, not necessarily those who want. I say to you, have a great day. Continue to support your radio station, Radio Cayman. Join Mr. Gilbert McLean at 12 noon for Talk Today. He is hosting for Sterling Dwayne Ebanks. I say to you, have a great day. And as usual, we ask the good Lord to bless these three beautiful, wonderful Cayman Islands, which many of us refuse to leave. We will stay here and we will be buried here.
Informative, impartial, insightful.
This is your talk show.
1-800-534-8255. Your calls, your input. This is for